We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you some breaking news. There's been reports all over the area of something crazy going on, something big. People's homes, their minds even, are being taken over by something called, what is it they're calling it? They're calling it Bad Movie Debate.
What up, nerds? It's Bad Movie Debate with me, Jacob Babb. Doing a review episode, a real short one probably, for Nosferatu. Just got to see it last night with my dad on Christmas Day at AMC. It was a Dolby Cinema, which I did not realize until we got there, which was pretty rad, don't get me wrong, but that's not even the whole point. Arguably the best movie of the year, definitely the best horror movie of the year. Might be the best movie of the year for me personally. There's a lot of good stuff that came out this year, but I think this one is just like, for me, is just knocked it out of the park. Just the way it was shot, edited, just everything about it. Robert Eggers is one of my favorite directors. If you've listened to any episode talking about horror, I always talk about how The Witch is one of my favorite movies of all time. So it's just an absolute blast of a ride for sure. No doubt about that. I wanted to get into a couple of specific things, I think, about the movie. First and foremost, it pays such a good homage to not only the 1922 Nosferatu, but also just the book Dracula and all of the film adaptations, from the Bela Lugosi one to Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula in the 90s with Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, and all of them. The way that the lighting is used, or the tonal lighting, like when you tone a movie, like do the color grading and stuff, you can do a specific, you can tint it or tone it in such a way, like temperature wise. So in the original 1922 Nosferatu, pretty much everything is shot during the day. It's 1922, so it was hard to shoot at night. But what they did was they would have like a blue filter, they would have the screen would be overly blue to signify that it's nighttime, or it'd be overly yellow to signify that it was daytime. And then there was like a warm light if it was like inside by the fire, or like sunrise or sunset or something like that. Not like yellow, like kind of like reddish orangey kind of a thing. That doesn't happen as much as the blue and the yellow. Those are apparent. But it's just really cool to see in this movie that when it is nighttime, it is almost black and white, but there's a little bit of blue in there, which is directly from that. There's scenes when Nicholas Hoult and his character Hutter walk into the little inn that he stays in the night before he goes and actually meets Count Orlok, and it's like there's a yellowish, warm, orangey tone because there's a raging fire, and so it signifies it's nighttime and inside. So I think it did a really good job. And the daytime scenes are pretty muted, very desaturated black and white, which I think is just a good idea for this movie, just in general. For the daytime shots, you don't want to be. It'd be weird if it was too yellow, it would be Breaking Bad there in Mexico. If it was too yellow, people think that these days, I think. So probably a good call to not do it that way for those specific scenes. But I think the way that they color graded paid a beautiful homage to those that original thing that they did in the 1922 Nosferatu. One of my favorite parts, and it's really not that big of a deal, but for me, I've read the book Dracula probably 5 times. I've seen every iteration of Nosferatu or Dracula. You can see that is based on the original novel and everything, and this is the only one where they had the vampire, if you want, with a big old burly mustache. That is in the novel. When he's first introduced, when Jonathan Harker is first introduced to Dracula in the castle before they get the deal, in his description it talks about how he looks old and stuff because he eats eats people's drinks people's blood, and he gets younger and more youthful as he gains the sustenance or whatever. But one of the biggest things is he has a big old burly mustache, which is an appropriate look for an Eastern European person at the time. So I just think that's really funny that this is the first one to finally get it right. And obviously immediately like a whole star up just because they did that and they paid they just nailed that, which is again not that important, but to me it's very important as a big Dracula fan in general. I think the thing that makes this movie much more interesting than the original Nosferatu and even Werner Herzog's I think it's in the 70s sometime. Even Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, which is amazing and beautiful in its own right. And if you haven't seen that one, you need to check that one out too, because there's definitely elements of that in this one. Eggers definitely took some inspiration from that one as well. I think this one does a good job of giving the perspective of Ellen or the Mina like fill in for the story. For those of you who don't know, which is shocking if you don't know this, if you didn't like this movie because you thought it was too closely related, too similar to Dracula, it's because it was a plagiarization of Dracula. They did not have the authority or the authorization or the permission to make this movie, and they just did the exact story of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which it says at the beginning, inspired by or based on Bram Stoker's Dracula. So they got sued into oblivion and stuff. So that's why the story is so similar. Now it doesn't matter because the story's so old that it's in the public domain, so anybody can do anything they want with the story. So moving past that, so the Mina Ellen in this one, it's in my opinion, it's her story. I think, and I see some interviews. I mean, I guess it's not my opinion. I've seen some interviews where Eggers was talking about like wanting to use, like show her perspective and like her experience a little bit more, because the first one definitely doesn't. It's mostly just like the men and stuff, which is a product of its time. It's 1922. Like they couldn't even speak. There wasn't even like speaking roles. It was a silent movie. So I think they did a really good job, or he did a really good job, like making it like her story, like on a first watch. I'm sure with anything with Robert Eggers, anytime you go back and you rewatch it, you can watch any of his movies from a different person's perspective, and it'll be just as good, if not even better than the first person you tagged onto. I think it makes sense that Ellen's the first person that you would tag onto in this one, because I think that was his intent based on what I had seen him say in an interview, like a clip of an interview at least. That being said, I know I'm really rambly. I really, really, really like this movie, and I'm trying to just hit all the talking points that I want to talk about. But I think that's the most important one. She is, it's her story. It starts with her reaching out to something, anything, and Count Orlok is the one who answers her and stuff. And they're always talking about her melancholia. Like the first hour, they always, like, pretty much anytime anybody talks to her or talks about her, they talk about her melancholia. So, which is an old-timey word for depression, which I feel like everybody should know by now. But and so it's like she says something about like her mom died young, her dad maybe still around, but it's pretty vague on what's going on with that. But she was super depressed, and she reached out for anything to help her through it, or anything she could, and she found Count Orlok, or Count Orlok found her. So she succumbed to the darkness. That's a big ad thing is like succumb to darkness, like come see Nosferatu, and she takes that, and I think that's a good like metaphor. I don't have this whole theory all the way like worked out, but I think it's an interesting metaphor. It's obviously that's depression. Like she's super depressed, and the darkness, depression, Count Orlok like takes possession of her until she meets Hutter, Nick Holt's character, and she sees a shining light, and she's like, I don't need to be like this anymore. I don't need to do this anymore. But like with anybody with depression knows, if you have depression like me, you know that it ebbs and flows. So sometimes you're good for a long time, and then just all of a sudden it just comes out of nowhere, and when you least expect it, after everything should be good, and like things come back up to the surface, and you're back in that darkness, and you have to decide like what you want to do. And it's kind of her journey is like deciding what, like, because like Orlok there's some spoilers in here. I'm gonna try to be as spoiler free as I can, but her whole journey is pretty much like deciding to succumb to the darkness and go with Count Orlok, or is she going to say, screw that, I'm done with that, I want to be with Hutter and live a life that I know I can and deserve and have been living for the past few years, in love, and everything's going good, got some great friends, and everything like that, and a cute little kitty, which is great. I can't remember the cat's name. Sorry. So I think that's part of like what her journey is about, and like that's the whole thing. And then you get, and then again, different perspectives. It's Eggers, so there's not just one perspective here. And then you got Hutter's character, very pretty standard kind of like hero's journey thing. John Campbell, hero's journey. He goes on a journey, he goes through trials and tribulations, he comes home and like stuff like that. It is what it is. In that regard, I haven't fleshed out any other characters, like where they are and like what they mean or like everything, because I just saw it last night at I think we got out of the movie theater at midnight last night. And then my dad actually had a pretty interesting thing when we were talking about it on the way home. There's a very specific shot where Ellen has she has one of those big old bouffant crazy ass 1800s dresses on, and like part of her dress is like a big old thing that looks like a black halo, and her and Willem Dafoe's character, the Van Helsing stand-in for this story, are having she's had like if she's gonna be their salvation or not. Like she has to decide, and it's like she looks very angelic with like a halo around her, but it's black. And my dad was talking about how interesting that is Christmas. So and like we were raised in Christianity, Catholicism, and stuff. So it came to both of our minds. But he was talking about how like he thinks it's interesting how it was like if it was white, it would have been way too on the nose and stuff. So he thought it was cool that it was an intentional thing of Eggers to do a black looking halo behind her when they were having this conversation about salvation, because it's like the means justify the ends in a way. So it was like like her deciding if she was going to potentially sacrifice herself for the greater good and stuff. Like it's kind of like a Jesus narrative splashed in there with her, because it's like she has to do a horrible thing to save the town from a plague, but and like that's not great, like how she has to do it and stuff. So it's very interesting, and there's a very quick little conversation about sin that I think is really interesting that they talk about, her and Willem Dafoe at some point during the movie, a little bit before that. So there's definitely something there too. Again, none of this is all super fleshed out. I'm just kind of rambling out everything me and my dad talked about and like my personal thoughts about everything. I think one random thing that came up that I thought was interesting was if you're a big music person, the score in this one pays direct homage to the homage to the original 1922 one. The main theme is very similar and has like certain elements or like notes or whatever. I'm not a big music person. Like technically I love music, but not like technically I don't really know a ton about it. But like the main themes are, and like score is very similar to the original one, which I thought was really great. Not surprised that happened, but it's also very similar to the Coppola, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like, because when I rewatched Nosferatu earlier this week to get ready for this one, I was like, wow, this is really reminding me of the score in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola one, and then went and saw this one yesterday and was like, oh my god, like it's all similar and stuff. So I think that's pretty rad that they were using the same like elements of the score throughout all of that and everything. I also did really like in this one how because the story is much more straightforward in Nosferatu as it is to Dracula. There's a lot of a lot more characters, a lot more side plot kind of stuff going on in the book and then Coppola's adaptation, which Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula is the most accurate like direct lifting of the book into a movie. Bela Lugosi's one is great, but it's pretty streamlined. It was the 30s. What can you do? And so that has all those extra elements and stuff. Nosferatu never had those extra elements, and I think it works without it because they do end differently. The original Dracula story ends differently than Nosferatu does. It's a smaller scale that I think does work because of the journey that we take. It's a little bit different, but it's basically the same story, which is why they got sued into oblivion. Regardless, I think they did I think he just did a really good job having the characters he needed and like having them fill in a different role. Like the Arthur character, I can't remember his name, but Arthur Aaron Taylor Johnson or whatever his name is. He's like the rich friend to Hutter and Ellen and stuff, who's Arthur in the original story. He owns the ship that comes in on the Demeter, and Nosferatu. If I'm remembering correctly, they briefly mention that there's a ship, like that's how he gets over and stuff. But there's not the whole thing with like the plague's on the ship and like the plague has come to town and there's a ghost ship that rolled in, nothing's there. Nobody's on there anymore. The captain's log's super scary and stuff. And then they made that entire The Last Voyage of the Demeter movie, which could have been really good, but ended in a really shitty way. But I'm not going to talk about that right now. They went against canon at the very end, and that's really annoying in my opinion. So they messed up on that. Don't know who greenlit that, but that was stupid. I digress. I really like that Eggers did bring in the ship. And like had like it's just a couple of quick little things about the ship, but you see some kills on the ship, some like horror stuff on the ship, and I think that was awesome to include, to make sure was included, because at the end of the movie it says based on the screenplay of Nosferatu 1922 by those guys who wrote it and the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. So he kind of melds the two stories into one cohesive narrative. In a way that I don't think anybody had done just yet. And I was telling some friends last night talking about it. It is, I just think it's my favorite version of this story. Obviously, the book is superior, but when it comes to visual media and movies and stuff, man, this might be the best telling of Dracula. Just the emotionality of it is really insane. All the acting was really good, so we don't need to waste time on that. The cast was incredible. They all did such a good job. All the sets, of course, incredible. All that stuff, amazing. Yeah, we don't even need to like get bogged down in that. The cinematography we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, but I guess my main thing about it is, even though it's not the actual story of Dracula, it's done in such a way that it tells an almost more compelling story. I'm not going to say it's a more compelling story than the actual novel of Dracula. That is a much more compelling story, so you don't need to freak out about that. But this one was more interesting to watch and maybe a little bit more poetically beautiful. Eggers, they were speaking. The dialogue was, if you've seen The Witch, he'd be doing period piece dialogue, no problem. So obviously the very flowery language was nice to see. And I think they hit that a little bit better than in Coppola's Dracula. They talk, pretty flowery in that, but there was just something about it in this one that the dialogue just fit a little bit better for me. I think the one thing that I've seen a lot of people talk about in like a negative way, and even some people that when I was watching it last night, some people in the theater were like cracking jokes or like just straight up like giggling to themselves, like little children, was like how sexual it is, like the sexuality of the whole thing. I don't know why people were like joking about that in the thing and like freaking out about it. It's not a big deal. We're all grown-ups. It's a very integral, it's a very important part of the story. Like that it is a sexual connection that they have. He says Ellen yells at Orlok that he can't love, and he's like, yeah, I don't care and stuff. But like it is an abusive relationship kind of love that's going on. She reaches out to him and she like gives herself to him at a young age, and then when she goes off and like leaves him, in his eyes, like leaves him for Hutter, he implements a plan to get her back. When Hutter signs the papers to sign over the building he's gonna buy, when he moves to Germany. And he's like, oh, it's just in my language. It's in my original native language. And Hutter's like, okay, yeah, because he's shitting bricks, which of course you should be. Orlok looks horrifyingly. He's very scary, and Bill Skarsgård did an incredible job. But I digress. He says, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Just sign right here. You forgot to sign this thing. But that was like like one of those like an appendix. Like a thing of a thing of a thing inside of a thing of a contract where it's just hidden in the back of the terms and conditions. is also you're getting divorced now and you're nullifying your marriage so I can be with her. So he did it all above board, which is kind of crazy that he tried to do it all above board and like legally correct before he's like with that because he gives him the 1, 2, 3 night, like you have like these 3 nights and stuff, and that first night he's like no, he signed you away, dude, like y'all are not legally married anymore and stuff. But going back to what I was saying about sexuality, though, like that's the whole point of it. It's a sexual relationship. She has her fits, and they're supposed to resemble, like they're supposed to be like she's having an orgasm. Like that's what that is. It's like I don't know what to tell you. Like if you're giggling at it, then you're not paying attention, or you like if you're giggling at it or you're feeling embarrassed by it and stuff. I mean, yeah, like that's kind of the point, is to feel weird about it, because it is kind of a horrifying thing seeing this woman who just got recently married having these fits that are very sexual in nature. It's like, yeah, like that's creepy. Like that's off. That's weird and stuff. But that's the point. Like this isn't a nice little Christmas family romp to go see. Like this is a deep, dense story that revolves around a lot of sexuality and stuff. And that's like, not to spoil the end or anything, but that's a big part of the end of it too. Like, and it's beautiful and it's done super well, and it's not as weird as, in my opinion, as people were making it out to be. I don't know. I think it was fine. I think it was great. I think it went exactly how it was supposed to in the version of the story that Eggers was trying to tell. I think all of that works without being too over the top. Kind of Orlok's dong is kind of a lot. It's very shocking to see, for sure. But it was the only thing I knew for sure going in, that was going to happen, and I was still not ready for it. So, that is what it is. And I think just lastly, the most important thing about this movie and why I loved it so much and why I think it's my favorite movie and why I absolutely think it deserves to be nominated for as many awards as it can, but specifically Oscars. Quick little rant. The Oscars are anti-horror movies. They hate giving horror movies any kind of recognition, even when it's something important and good. Get Out, like, I'm sure everybody knows about the Get Out situation. Get Out, obviously a horror movie. A beautiful social commentary about Black people's experience in this country and stuff. Everybody's raving about it. It's so good. Jordan Peele knocked it out of the park. And they want to recognize it? Great. But they list it as a comedy because it's Jordan Peele, and it was kind of funny because he was a comedy guy before he started making horror movies. Absolutely absurd. There's no way they can do that with this one, but this one absolutely deserves to have some recognition at, like, Oscars are like the top tier. Like if you get Oscars for your stuff, like that's the highest award you can get in Hollywood for movies and stuff. So I don't know. It deserves it. It deserves it. And part of the reason is because my favorite, absolute favorite thing about this movie was the use of shadows. The cinematography and the shadow play is so damn good. And it can be argued. I'm not 100% sure on this. Somebody let me know if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure 1922 Nosferatu invented using shadow to elicit fear in a movie. They couldn't talk. They couldn't speak. It was silent movies. They used shadow to illustrate the famous scene of Orlok's shadow going up the stairs and then coming into the door and stuff. They use that to elicit fear because it's creepy as hell with his hand, and he's going like up the stairs and shit. Scary as hell. First of all, but also they did that to do, because they don't have CGI back then. They literally couldn't even use audio, like, except for like speaking audio, which is insane. So they were like, okay, we'll just do a really long cast shadow to illustrate the part of the novel where Dracula is coming to commune with Nina, Ellen, in like the ethereal plane, not like physically there, but like hypnotically reaching out to her. That's how they illustrate it. And people have been using shadow play in horror movies and a lot of other stuff ever since. I was literally talking to my mom about it Christmas Eve night when I got into town, like because I was ranting and raving about how excited I was for the movie, and just so happened to change the channel because some movie she was watching ended, and I was like, "Well, what else is on?" While we're talking, and Scooby Doo was on. Scooby Doo, where are you? The OG original Scooby Doo, where are you? And it's the episode which witch is which, and literally like the zombie guy, like there's a scene where Shaggy and Scooby are walking down the hallway and they're casting shadows, and lo and behold, coming up behind them, at first you just see the shadow of the hand, and you don't see him, but like that's from Nosferatu. Like it's insane how important that shadow work is in the original one because it's still happening to this day from Scooby Doo to like any horror movie you've ever seen, and the way they do it in this movie is insane. Like it's all in the trailer. His hand coming over the entire town is just beautiful. But then they do the same thing where, like at the very beginning, the curtain is flowing and you can see his shadow. When it goes away, you don't see him there, but then it blows back up and you can see his shadow in like between the curtain and like the moonlight coming in, but then when it drifts back and then there's nothing there, it drifts back and you see him as they're talking, as they first meet, as she's reaching out to someone to like help her with her melancholia and whatever, and like she's all lonely and stuff, and just so many scenes like that where the shadow work is just not only cool to see, like the cinematography, it is cool, it's like great cinematography, just how they captured that, and like it's cool to look at and we love looking at it, but it's a part of the direct narrative, like it's a part of the story, using like shadows to help tell a story, and especially because the whole thing is like they're like, I'm in his shadow, you're in his shadow, you're in the shadow of this evil, of this demon, of Count Orlok, this Nosferatu. That's the whole point, like that's a whole major point of the narrative in general, and so it's just amazing to see how they made it work in this version, to the point where Kyle Lane, he's been on the show. If you don't know Kyle Lane, go back and listen to the episodes with Kyle. He's my TV guy, my TV liaison, as I call him, and we talk about TV shows that we like. That another one should be coming soon because the new season of something's coming out soon. We're really excited to get in on that, but that's down the road. I was talking to him. He saw it. He got to see it December 24th. He got to see it on Christmas Eve. And I was talking to him about it after I got out because I'm such a huge fan of it, and like he thought it was, he's a big horror guy too, but he was like, but he doesn't like a lot of old stuff, so he's never seen the original. He's never read Dracula. He probably hasn't seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola one, and stuff. But like he barely knows the story of Dracula, and he was like, I think that might be my favorite horror movie of all time. He was amazed, absolutely blown away by the how incredible the like shadow work was in cinematography. Like he was like, it just blew his mind how it was not only just really cool and well done, but how important it was to the story. And if that's not a good enough reason to give this 5 out of 5 stars, because like me, a huge nerd, knows everything about, or likes to pretend he knows everything about Dracula, and like all like seen everything, read everything I can about Dracula and Nosferatu, and a guy who just kind of knows the name Dracula and like knows the basic general story, whatever. And he's like 5 out of 5, best horror movie I've seen in a really long time, one of the best movie of the year. Like that, it's 5 out of 5, and the Oscars need to understand that people who don't know anything about this are still loving it because it's so well done and it deserves to be recognized for that. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for sticking with this really rambly journey into my thoughts on this movie. I just, I could have written something down and not just kind of stream of consciousness talked, but I think this is more fun. This was a better way to do it because I just had so much to say, and I just kept getting distracted every time I tried to write something down. So I was like, I'm just going to talk, and hopefully I'll get everything out there. So if you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate it. Follow on TikTok as long as it's there. Instagram, which hopefully will never, that's USA owned, so it'll never go away probably. So follow on all of that. YouTube. and everything to see more stuff like this. And yeah, just appreciate it.